that was it from my side, and I will be glad to discuss with you. I will be glad to discuss in the comment section and now in the Hangout, and thanks for your attention.
Excellent. That was, again, a very nice introduction into what I think is a fascinating topic. So I've shared the link just as you were finishing there, so hopefully we'll be joined by a few different voices as well. So I guess as a young 20-something-year-old without kids, it's difficult for me to say what I would do with kids, because obviously without actually having kids myself, it's very theoretical. But with you with a 4-year-old daughter, do you think it's a conscious effort to say, I'm going to raise them in this way rather than this way? I'm going to, like you say, the Richard Feynman path rather than the religious indoctrination path.
Yes, it's pretty much, it should be a very conscious decision, and a person should plan for that. It's interesting, when I was a child myself, I was also imagining myself being 20-something or 30, having 2 kids, how I will communicate to them. Sometimes I thought, okay, now I'm little, now I have to remember how it feels to be little for me to understand the kids better. So I guess it's a conscious path, and it's very, very complicated thing to be a parent, and we have to plan for that. We have to read books about parenthood, and we have to listen to people who already have kids carefully. Of course, it's very different thing to have your own child, but yes, it's quite a conscious act.
Okay, I guess following on from what I was saying, that I thought the question during my first question. So, what would you say to a religious person or a sort of, I don't want to say conspiracy thinking, but that sort of type of person who says, well, you're just indoctrinating them with science or atheism? How would you respond to that?
I can understand their concern, because for a person, it's very difficult to step out of his own shoes. People usually feel threatened when they, especially if they truly believe that they will go to hell by just questioning the existence of God. So the first thing I would try to address is talk honestly about their own values and say, do you value truth more or do you value God more? That's the first thing. If the person is ready to discuss this topic, then I would talk to them about other religions. I would talk to them about saying indoctrination is something rather limiting, and my goal with my children is to bring up a child free from any indoctrination, free to choose whatever they find appropriate, to equip them with tools how to distinguish true from lies, and how to distinguish pure imagination or pure myth from something that you can trust, and something that you can really use with certain degree of certainty in your life, which has not only theoretical implication, but which has a lot of really practical implications in the areas of health, for example. When a person is looking for the best way to see how he should approach treating himself with drugs, or what he should eat or should not eat, how he should exercise or she should exercise, all the stuff. Or another way, if he's sold a product, or if she is sold an idea, everyday steps in work life, everything should be governed by reason and logic. So I guess I would say that what we are proposing is an opposite of indoctrination, and it's giving people freedom and giving them really open mind.
Excellent. We were joined by a guest. Are you ready to talk now? Is it Ash?
Hold on just a minute.
Yeah, that's fine. Don't worry. We can ad-lib for another minute or two.
It was you were talking about the truth, teaching children the truth, and you were also within the same subject, talking about religious people telling their children the truth. Unfortunately, can't you see there's a big error there in what you actually just said, because they actually believe the truth is what they believe. So in saying the truth to someone who is a Christian, they actually take the teachings of the Bible as being the truth. So that wouldn't make any sense to a Christian.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and this is why the first thing I would discuss is the values of the person. Actually, they themselves, and I distinguish God with I'm not a philosopher in my background, but I have a feeling what truth is, and the truth is an undeniable fact that that is supported by evidence. This is obviously different from God, because God is by definition is something that should be trusted on faith, not on evidence, and challenging God is considered to be a sin. It's considered to be something dangerous. So I would try to talk to a person and say, okay, my definition of truth is this: is a fact that goes with undeniable evidence. And people, from my experience, the religious people accept internally lying. They accept internally falsifying facts and putting some scams to work to protect God, to protect their faith. And I believe they also think it's truth. I believe they also think it's a rightful things to do, but they never challenge themselves if this is right, if this is actually something right to do. This is why I would challenge them first on what's more important to them, God, and try to distinguish God from undeniable facts. And I would not see any harm from, for example, discussing with a deeply religious person other religions and say, okay, I'm an atheist, or I was brought in an atheist. I'm searching for a truth. Please help me. Please give me some mechanism how I should distinguish the truth, the God truth, the truth in your view, from falsehoods in other religious books. I have, for example, today I have a Christian preacher, tomorrow I have a Muslim preacher, and the day after tomorrow I have Mormon preachers. Please, you were brought up in a religious family. Please give me some way to distinguish. I'm reading Book of Mormons. I'm reading Quran. I'm reading Bible. I don't know. I honestly don't know. I am honestly seeking for the truth. I'm not attacking you. Please give me some way to find the real truth.
Hey, Nick.
Yeah.
This is Brett. Hey, I was kind of what you just said just now kind of dovetails into what Global asked you earlier about. What about the religious person that says that you're trying to indoctrinate them with science? But that I think that's the point. You're asking for a way to try and cut through all the various religions, and that is exactly what science is. And science isn't a set of beliefs that you're indoctrinated with, right? Science is a means by which we explore the world and arrive at conclusions based upon the evidence and the facts that we gather to ourselves. So it seems to me that's the very thing. When they criticize science, saying that it's just another religion, it's just another way of indoctrinating a child, it's exactly the opposite. Because science doesn't care about the conclusions you come to, but Islam does. It wants you to come to the conclusion that Allah is God and that Muhammad is the prophet. Christianity wants you to come to a certain conclusion, and that is Jesus was the Son of God and is part of the Trinity. They all have their end goals, which is something that is completely absent from science. So that's what I would probably tell a religious person. Well, that's what I'd use to try and come to that same conclusion of, well, which one of you is right? So, well, science is one of those ways that we use to do that. Philosophy might be another way in which you see competing ideas against each other. But I think science really does help you do that.
Yes, that's a very good point. But from my experience, what I've seen in different debates is the very word science scares them away. They say science. They say science is. You know, I recently heard a video in some YouTube video from a person who said, "Well, now I understand that I was indoctrinated with dinosaurs. Dinosaurs were invented, and for those people to invent and use so-called science, anthropology, just to have something to do, and this is why it's much more effective from my perspective to just relate personally and say." And I'm completely honest. My brother tells me read Bible and search truth in the Bible, and I read Bible. I read those terrible verses to him. He gets very very nervous about things. He says, "You're attacking. You're trying to deconvert me. You will never deconvert me." I say, "No, I'm just searching for truth. Please help me. Please guide me. Please give me answers."
I like that. I like that approach. I do. I really appreciate what you're saying is, I'm not attacking. I'm asking questions. I'm looking for your insight so that I can understand how it is that you have come to this conclusion, because it seems right for you. I have not had that conclusion, or I used to have that conclusion. I no longer have it. I'm not trying to attack. I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, especially say, okay, I believe you. I believe you have very good intentions. I like people in general. I find those preachers, those Mormon preachers, are very friendly too. They don't seem like they are mean people trying to put someone to hell. Also, those guys in my neighborhood, I have a lot of Muslims. They are very friendly. I have one of the safest neighborhoods in the United States. So they are also very good and friendly, and their children and wives are pretty okay with wearing their traditional clothes. So please just help me, just put yourself for a minute in my shoes. I'm clear. I read the Bible. I have questions about it. I find very many similarities with other books. I see contradictions. Please help me understand how I can accept that.
Right. There were some Mormons that came to my home. They would ring the doorbell, and I would always let them in, and I wanted to talk to them. So we would get to talk, and I would ask them questions, and they would ask me questions, and I flat out told them that I didn't believe, that I was an atheist, and that was okay with them. That was the whole point. I'm a good candidate to try and convert. Correct. So one of the things they finally got to at the end of one of their sessions with me was to ask me to pray to God about whether these things were true or not that they were telling me, and I had to stop them and tell them, you're putting the cart before the horse. You're asking me to pray to something that I don't think is there. You're already making me assume that there's something that can answer this. Can you show me that there is something to which I should be praying? And they could not do it.
Yeah,
and I think they had never thought of that before.
Yeah, right. And the more gentle we are with people, the more we show them that we understand them. The more we show them genuine
Well, but we're more like them
interest.
than we are different than them, right? We're all searching. We're all trying to find something
Yeah,
to navigate
exactly.
through life, right?
If we challenge, sometimes it helps to challenge for some people, because I've read some guys who say, okay, I saw a video, a very, very like brutal video by the amazing atheist attacking, heads-on attacking religion. I really made a resolution to find. This guy said the resolution to find evidence for Christ, and he really did research, and he really searched, and the more he searched, and he was very, very fundamentalist Christian, and he became an atheist after that. So for some people, it's effective to be very straightforward. I would not avoid confrontation. I would not avoid serious questions if they are ready for that. But if you see them getting defensive, if you see them getting really offended or at least emotional, then we should just calm down and demonstrate that we are searching for the truth. We are not trying to impose anything on anybody.
Yeah, I agree.
And searching for the truth is something that the science fundamentally does, but they don't want to accept that. The word science sometimes and very often scares them away.
Right.
It's weird to me that they always seem to project, science is a religion, as if religion is a bad thing, and it's like, oh, you just have faith in science. It's like, because it's your religion. It's like, are you trying to say that faith and religion are bad, and therefore we should? I don't really understand that, but that's sort of beside the point. Anyway, I did have a screenshot, but then it just exploded. But anyway, carry on.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I wonder if, I think what they might be trying to do is, and this is just my assumption, is that they are trying to, because we obviously say religion and faith are bad things. I think what they're trying to say is, yeah, you say it's a bad thing, but you're doing the same thing we are. It's not a bad thing. You just have a different religion than we do. I think if you pressed them, they might come to that conclusion.
I think. Well, it's I remember reading. I think I was watching an inspiring philosophy video in which they did sort of a childish, you're just as bad as us sort of thing. But it seems to be you're just as bad as us, but worse. It's like both ways of, it's like when John Lennox says, faith is a good thing, but it takes more faith to be an atheist. It's like, so is that a good thing to take more faith, or is that a bad? I just don't understand this inconsistent position of what they actually mean when they say, Frank Turek says it takes more faith to be an atheist. John Lennox says faith is a good thing. William Lane Craig has reasonable faith. It just seems a very inconsistent thing. But yeah.
I never thought about it like that. You're right.
That's a very good point. Right.
Faith is such a good thing. Then why is it that if it takes so much faith and they can't have that much to be an atheist, then maybe we're right?
I guess, as I've got the screenshot up, I'll briefly mention it. This is, I don't know if anyone's seen him, but Star Splitter has got an excellent channel, so I recommend you all that. He reviewed this paper, and I thought it was an excellent review. I don't really agree with a lot of what he said in that paper, because I think it's quite an interesting paper. It's probably not the best paper about this, but it's something that he did. So basically, the bottom line is the main thing. So it's judgments about fact and fiction from children from religious and non-religious backgrounds. So it's quite an interesting thing. So it's 5- and 6-year-olds. Basically, the long and short of it was that children in religious backgrounds found it hard to differentiate between fact and fiction, and particularly they had this duality almost between religious fiction and religious fact. So, for example, if you would contain a story that has an impossible thing in a normal, normal context, in a typical context, then they would reject it because they said, no, that's impossible. When it came to a religious thing, i.e., the feeding of the 5,000, or is it 5,000, whatever the number is, they would say it is impossible, but it happened because it's in the Bible. Right. And that's what 5- and 6-year-olds. So I think it's an excellent paper. I'll put the link in the.
Well, it's not just 5- or 6-year-olds. It's 56- and 65-year-olds.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the thing.
But you know what? The title of that paper, "Judgments About Fact and Fiction by Children from Religious and Non-Religious Backgrounds," I think that's interesting because there was something that I've noticed in growing up, and I'm being, when I was a little kid, I was very religious. I went to an evangelical church with my parents, or my mother. and sat through all the stories, heard all the tales, believed in the Holy Ghosts and Jesus and God and demons and Satan and all that stuff. In fact, in 1970 whatever, in 1971, my grandmother had given me a Bible for Christmas, and I used to set it on the nightstand next to my bed. And then when The Exorcist came out, whatever year that was, I didn't even see the movie. All I saw were the commercials for it. It scared me to death. I was terrified of the Satan coming into my room, and I hid the Bible. I'll never forget, in the bottom drawer of the set of drawers next to my bed that the nightstand it was on. I hid it underneath my sweaters because I was scared Satan would see it and come get me. I mean, this is how superstitious I was. All right. And I'm setting that up just so you understand. I had nightmares when I grew up. I always had nightmares as a kid, and monsters here and things chasing me there, and I was afraid of Godzilla, and I mean the whole bit. I was terrified of everything. But what's really interesting is my kids are being brought up in a completely atheistic household. We don't talk about that kind of thing, and in fact, when we do, I point out to the kids, that there are reasonable explanations for these things. If you hear a bump, let's go find out what that is. Oh, look at that. Something fell in the closet. We explore those things. My kids don't have nightmares. It's bizarre.
Excellent.
Really interesting.
Excellent point. That's exactly what I was arguing in the presentation. Religious kids have fears. They feel filthy, guilty, worthless. And thanks for sharing your experience, because I was brought up as your children are, and my children. This is why my 4-year-old doesn't have any fears.
Nope.
When I say to her there are no monsters, she's not afraid of darkness. She's not afraid of falling asleep. I tell her stories about solar system forming. I tell her stories, bedtime stories about farmer ants who collect leaves and farm fungi, and for example about slave taking farms. Now, when I was preparing this presentation, I realized that some of the pictures might look scary, but my daughter is not afraid of anything and she understands that there is a reasonable explanation for everything, and that's.
Well, I was going to say now my daughter is 12, getting ready to turn 13, but the only thing she's afraid of it's very interesting because she has gotten a fear of things now, but what she's afraid of are snakes. Not too much, but snakes, spiders, things that have like a biological reason for us to be afraid of them. You know what I mean? Something that goes deep into our psychology, but not because she was bitten by a snake or anything like that. But I think also part of it has to do with friends at school. All the girls scream when it happens, so she's joined it now. She's picked up on it. But the things she's afraid of are things that could genuinely hurt her. A particular spider might bite and hurt her. She might be afraid of those things. But she's not afraid of anything that is immaterial, anything that can come at her at night, through an open closet. Those things don't bother her at all. She has no concept of them, really.
And I believe it's something, a very, very good gift that any parent can give their children, including religious parents.
No, that's true, because we have some people in the neighborhood when we don't hang out with them anymore. They got extremely religious and go to a very fundamentalist evangelical church and whatnot. And her daughter is the same age as my daughter, and they used to play together. And one day they were over at our house, and their daughter was rather misbehaving. And I was always told how well behaved my children are. And it's because I taught them human respect for another human being who is just like them and whatnot. And I'm not sure how well religious people teach their people, their kids. But at any rate, they were over here and the girl had misbehaved. And the mother told her, hey, just because she's not around to watch her, Jesus is watching. And the look of terror on that child's face made me sick. And I'm not exaggerating. She got this look on her face of, oh my, you're right. You may not be looking at me, but that invisible man can see me. And I saw now this I may be a little, hyperbole, but, like the color drained from her face. Her eyes got a little big, like, I won't be able to get away with it. And I thought, what a horrible, torturous way. No wonder these kids have nightmares. My kids behave because I tell them that you do it for right's sake. You do it because you want to be a good person and you want them to treat you that way. For no other reason do you do these things. And they do them. And I'm complimented about my children and their behavior by everybody when they go over to their homes. My children are very respectful for that reason. They want the respect, they give it. Not
very,
because
very
Jesus
good
is
point.
watching.
This is a very good point, but just nightmares is a light version, because a lot of accounts of people who are so depressed by this constant guilt, when they become teenagers, they want sex, they want to see nude bodies, they want to touch each other, kiss each other, and they have more and more guilt about it. They are taught that you shouldn't have sex before marriage, and that you will going to hell about it. And then they have depression, not only nightmares, they have depressions. And some people say, I would be dead if I was still religious, because I was very close to killing myself.
That's right.
And that's exactly, very good point.
No, I suffered when I was a teenager with certain anxieties for that very reason. I thought, because I had begun to have thoughts about the girl across the street and wanting to have a girlfriend, that when I would get certain ailments, I thought it was God doing it. And I thought God was punishing me in order to keep my mind fully on the Bible and fully prepared for a life as a prophet, a clear man of God. And because I was beginning to have carnal thoughts, that's why I would have certain illnesses. And it really fucked me up for a few years. And people can sit there and psychoanalyze that was the beginning of my skepticism, and in some ways it was, because I had to find a reason for why I was feeling the illnesses I was feeling, and it turned out to be a physical reason, not a supernatural reason. But in my supernatural mindset, I thought it was from God. And I was horribly guilty, and it was torture. It really was. So yep, I agree. I lived it, man.
I'm sort of in the middle of you two, which is quite interesting, because I was sort of an observing Christian. I wasn't a fundamentalist, but I wasn't raised, particularly atheistically, and I guess I was somewhat in the middle. In the, I was reasonably scared of stuff, but not sort of in the sort of supernatural sort of. Although I was terrified of when I watched the Blair Witch Project, which was probably about, when did it come out? About 2000 and something. So I was about
something like that.
9, 10, something like that. And I missed the first bit where they said it's basically all a load of bollocks. So I was like, I thought this was generally based. So I was terrified by that. As I got older and sort of, I guess, more, as you say, sort of skeptical and sort of more scientifically motivated, you do lose that fear. But I can completely understand how people always, even atheists who were fundamentalists can still have that anxiety of, well, what if I'm going to hell? What if I was wrong with, questioning this? And what if I am being deceived? So I can understand where they come from, because it gets so ingrained that it's like, you can still be phobic of things that happened, very early on in childhood. So I'm interested in the middle of not being raised as an atheist and not being raised as a sort of fundamentalist. This sort of, I can sort of see this trajectory of, one is, the sort of atheistic path, one is the fundamentalist path, and I'm sort of in the middle, and it does seem to be in the middle of, it could have been worse, it could have been better, and, I say better and worse, from the perspective of an atheist. So, no, it's interesting to see this sort of almost, what you'd expect to see of, between each of the sort of conditions. So, it's quite interesting.
Listen to this for a minute, because this will be a good segue into what we're talking about and how the future goes. I'm not sure if this will come across, so tell me if it doesn't, but I'm going to play something here. If I can get this turned out. Can you hear that?
Not too loudly.
Okay, let me see if I can get back and find a better version here. Hold on just a second. Hang on. Okay, did you hear that?
Yeah, that sounds like a fox
Okay.
in Sahara.
Well, there you go. When I moved in, this was several years ago, to my home, I heard that sound one night, and it was kind of worse than that, and it woke me up. Nobody else in the house woke up, and I couldn't figure out what it was. It sounded like, if you've ever heard the sound, it sounds like a child being, knifed to death. It's a horrible sound, and I didn't know what it was. In my old days, I was just terrified. That's a banshee. That's some sort of a demon. I don't know what it was, but that's probably what it is. It's a ghost, that kind of thing. But instead, I got up and I looked around, and my wife was sleeping through it. My kids were sleeping through it. I went out into my neighborhood, and it was so loud out in the neighborhood, but nobody else's lights were on. Everybody was sound asleep, and I began to question my sanity. I started to think, am I going crazy? But I could hear it so clearly that I overcame my initial fear. This kind of goes back to what Global was saying. Like, you can understand how atheists still retain this residue. I had to get over that. I then got over my own thoughts that I must be insane, until the fox jumped off the fence behind my house and ran across the street and made the same sound again, and I was able to put two and two together, right? But in my old days, or in the days of people who are superstitious, I'm not so sure they would have investigated. They would just chalk that up to some sort of supernatural activity. It's a ghost, It was horrible.
Exactly.
Sorry, Nick, do you want to say something?
Yeah, exactly. And we even have a very good toy with 40 different animals with their pictures and respective sounds. And our child already knows all of them. This is how we protected her. And
yep. No, you didn't protect
Global asked me earlier if it's a conscious choice to raise children the Feynman way, and I say yes, and it includes also such mundane things as buying toys and as buying books for a child, and then she's protected from horrors, from nightmares, and from horrors like this.
I'm actually quite tempted to do like an experiment into this, sort of, prime people with a supernatural story, and then just sort of like a news article about if you do it with children, you can say scientists conclude there's no such thing as supernatural, and then have kids alone in like a dark room for like 10 minutes. And would the ones that were primed with the supernatural, would they be more scared than those who were primed with there is no such thing as supernatural? When you sat in the dark, you're just on your own. That sounds really unethical and probably illegal, but that sort of experiment I think would be fascinating, because it does sort of, I think it is a correlation, but whether we could establish causation, remains to be seen. That I don't think it's a coincidence that people who are scared of sort of supernatural things have more, like with this very anecdotal evidence here, do have more nightmares. I don't think that's a coincidence, but
it's interesting. You could design such an experiment with adults, and they can consent.
No, they already have that. If you go look on YouTube, Darren Brown had done that.
Yeah, exactly. You just reminded me.
Did you see that one where they put those people in that dark room and they couldn't see anything, and then there was nothing happening, right? But they would like swear there was somebody standing behind them, or they would hear things. And there was one lady who had absolutely she felt comfortable in there or something like that. And then they took them out, and he would prime them. And then they would see certain things. I mean, it was awesome.
Yeah, it was the fact versus faith one, wasn't it? Because it was that atheist, and then he tried.
Maybe that is what it was. Yeah. How he could turn atheists into believers or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah. No.
That was fascinating.
I love Darren Brown.
I love him to death. I even shaved my goatee to be somewhat like him a few years ago.
I was getting there, but then I thought it looks a bit evil on me. So whereas he pulls it off.
You're from that alternate universe with evil Spock and.
Oh yeah. But no, you're right. It has been done. It seems so. But I think there's something to that. I think, for example, you know, when I had a power cut the other night about 11 o'clock at night, so it was dark anyway, but my light just suddenly went off, and I thought, okay, that's a bit weird. I think if that was me as someone who believes in the supernatural, I'd think, okay, now ghosts are going to come out, or, you know, I was watching, was it Vine or one of those, you know, funny short videos on YouTube, and it was like a murderer comes in and they pull their sheets above their, you know, head, and then he goes, oh, I can't stab you now because, in, you know, flawed children logic, you know, the covers protect you from anything. So I just think it's an interesting sort of experience to compare. Yeah, when the lights go out, you know, which one is more scared?
Well, I'd ask my kids to think about stuff like with ghosts, right? And I'd ask them. I'd say, you know, they'd be afraid that, like, let's say if they were afraid, or if they'd heard that there was a fear, because they didn't have this, you know, that their closet door was open, and so something would come out, and I'd say, but what does the closet door have to do with anything, right? I mean, how is that going to protect you from a monster, right, or a ghost? Ghosts are supposed to go right through it, right? And then they go, yeah, because that's the typical thing. Ghosts can go through the walls. And then I asked them, because their bedrooms are on the second floor of the house, and we actually have a basement, so they're three stories up. And I said, well, if the ghosts can go through the walls, why aren't they just falling right through the floor? They could never get up here. And then you just start thinking about these ridiculous notions that they have. Like, well, why would they have eyes? How are they going to see? They must be, you know, guys, you know how light works, right? And I would explain photons and how they react with nerve endings in your eyes and all that. And then, you know, how it sends the electrical signal to the brain and all that stuff. And I said, so how does that work on a ghost? They don't have those things. So how are they picking up the photons to be able to see even where you're sleeping? And then they would instantly, maybe not understand fully that you know, neurology and physiology, but they didn't need to. They could see what I was saying, and they could put those dots together and see how stupid it was, that these things can't happen.
Yeah, exactly. The same thing I've thought recently about skeletons. As a very little child, I was afraid of, you know, some stories of skeletons walking, horror movies, and now it's so easy to explain that skeleton cannot walk without muscles. So just relax. And I believe my 4-year-old would also catch it immediately and wouldn't be afraid.
Well, like Jason and the Argonauts when he's fighting a skeleton.
Yeah.
That is great. I was going to say my age there, but I'm very young, so I'm not showing my age at all. So, but yeah, the thing with ghosts, and the same thing with hell, like pain, you know, doesn't exist if you don't have nerve endings. Okay, that's just, you know, a given. So God would have to either reinstate your, I guess, you know, central nervous system,
your neurophysiology,
you know, and I just think if he did do that, then that's not a loving God. So I don't think that a God that is described in the Bible would do that. So it's kind of a heads you win, tails you lose, or heads I win, tails you lose, in that either God is malevolent, and it doesn't matter if you pray to him or not. It's like, if he's prepared to reinstate all your nerve endings in order to punish you forever, that's not a God that is just and loving, and therefore, you know, not a God it's worthy to, you know, respect, let alone worship. But if he didn't do that, then, you know, bring on all the pain you can. I'm not going to detect any of it. But on the subject of ghosts, it's why I can't watch Paranormal Activity. It's like, you know, the scene, I think it's in the first one, where they drop all the pots and pans at the same time, and it's terrifying. I just can't help but think there's like 10 ghosts in there saying, all right, and 3, we're going to drop them all. Okay, 3, go! And then it's just, I just can't take it seriously as soon as you imagine what they're actually doing.
To kind of go back with my thoughts and to piggyback on what you just said, I was heavily into the paranormal when the movie Poltergeist came out. Mm-hmm. And if you've ever seen that, there's a scene there's the scene where they can see the ghosts that are coming down the stairs, and they're wisping away, and they like move the chandelier. I remember watching, even talking about it right now, I got goosebumps going, see, that's what it really is like. Finally, the rest of these people can understand that this is reality. See, they really are. And but then, why the hell are they using the stairs? Right? You know,
that is very true. Yeah, I don't get why they're all Victorian as well. There's never like caveman ghosts. There's never one from like last week. They're just always wearing the same sort of Victorian, maybe Edwardian if they're pushing it.
Yeah, you never see this old Roman guy wandering around or nothing like that.
Guys, I want to add one thing about being guilty and being scared. a lot of former religious guys report that they were very scared of being rejected by their own parents, which is also very, very bad in terms of upbringing. And a lot of guys reported, like I was on one of recent YouTube hangouts, and people said, yeah, the people from the Bible Belt said, my mother told me that if God would require me to kill my child, I would do. And for my surprise and horror, many people said, yeah, my mother also said so. And like those children are hanging on a verge of being killed if their mother contracts some type of mental illness, then she can easily kill them. That's an extreme case, but the horror that the child will be abandoned in teenage, they cannot come out as an atheist because they are afraid of being kicked out of the house.
It's pretty common in the South.
Yeah, that's it's the South has is its own unique environment, I think.
Oh yes, it does. Hello, everybody. By the way.
Hi, Foxhole. How are you
You
today?
snuck in there with the conversation. So, did you want to introduce yourself, or I guess?
Sure. I'm Randy, also known as the Foxhole Atheist, just because I don't know. I was in the military, and there are atheists in foxholes.
I like it.
I saw your comment on the Facebook link there, Nick, and I guess I just hadn't reloaded it. I've been sitting and listening for a while, though.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, in the South, there is a lot of that mentality. I saw quite a bit of it myself growing up in the area, and there's a very intense cultural stigma against not being Christian. And so, you know, I can remember telling my mother, and it's kind of funny. It's almost exactly the response I might have expected if I had told her I was gay. Oh my God! I knew this was gonna happen. And so, don't get me wrong, my mother's a great. Well, she actually probably would have taken me being gay better than me being an atheist.
my mother is great.
And so,
well,
but yeah,
it's
it's
difficult.
a big thing.
Do you ever try to deconvert her?
We had conversations for a long time, and at one point I thought I had argued her toward a position of kind of mild deism, where she would admit that, okay, the Bible has problems, it has flaws, it has moral ambiguity, but she's very sick now. She's got cancer, and the treatments didn't go well, and now she stopped treatments and she doesn't have long left. And so I don't really argue with her anymore, but since that's occurred, she's become pretty fundamentalist again, real strongly religious about everything. And superstitious.
Just if that were in my situation, sometimes something like that, in that kind of a circumstance where you understand that they're not in their religious beliefs out of seeking the knowledge or out of trying to find, navigate their lives in a more, realistic way, you know what I'm trying to say, and that they're in that religion in order for a sense of comfort because of their pending, mortality. I wouldn't encourage it, but I certainly would not do anything to discourage it, and probably would be very agreeable to them, because I really think in a lot of ways that's where religion comes from, is dealing with our mortality. And I think if you take it away from some people, you may be doing them more harm than good.
Yeah, I definitely
especially
agree.
when they don't have much more to live.
Right, and Fox, you have my condolences and my sympathies. That's got to be rough.
Well, it is, and I lost my stepfather not too long ago, and he was a lot like Daddy. And I
Hmm.
thought of it this way. This is kind of how I dealt with it, is just to think that, I knew him so well. I lived with him for so long. I heard every kind of joke he would make. I heard every kind of funny comment or snide remark or what he would say when he was angry or happy and all this stuff, And it almost is like I can ask him questions. I know what he would say to just about anything. And so that's about the closest we get to immortality.
Yep, I agree. That's exactly right.
But he lives on in that way. I can
Yep.
still talk to him. It's not a
Yep.
spirit. It's my memory of him.
Well, I think there are two very real ways in which we can have our immortality, and that is one way, like you're stating, in the memories of those that survive us, and our influence on them, so that they may think of us when something happens, or they may take our advice and say, what would that guy have done? I really respected him in this particular field, and so I'm going to do what he did, and that kind of thing. So our influences live on, and then of course our influences live on genetically in any children we have. So when you come to understand that that's the only mortality that you have, you sure the hell appreciate life a hell of a lot more, I think.
Right.
Gives you a really good, strong reason to leave the best of impressions on those around you.
That's right. Yep, it really does. And it makes you respect, I think it makes you respect their lives as well, because you understand that this is their only shot. And especially when it comes to my kids, I don't want to screw them up. They're not gonna go to heaven and be able to live forever, and I'll see them again. I mean, this is their shot too. They won't reincarnate so that we can work it out again. I mean, these things are not gonna happen. I mean, this is their one shot, and boy, it makes parenting all that more focused. It makes my time with them that more intense, that I don't want to lose that, and I want to squeeze every moment I can out of it before they have to go on and live their lives and I end mine. I mean, I don't know. The religious people say that they're happier, and I'd almost be willing to grant them that yeah, sometimes ignorance is bliss, but you don't have an appreciation for life the way that I do. You think it's just this temporary way station in this eternity of yours, and that you lived eternity past as a soul, and then you spend this short amount of time in the timeout corner called Earth, and then you spend an eternity back in your spiritual realm. How could you have respect for this amount of time that you live here if for you it's not even a drop in the bucket? It's a molecule in the bucket. I don't know. Whatever.
Well, it's what I find strange about things like heaven and hell, because they say it's outside of time. I find it hard to conceptualize that of, I die and then I go to hell, for example, because let's face it, that's probably where I'm going to go if it's true. Well, and then I go to hell and I meet someone and it's like, oh wow, I didn't know you were here. And then it's like, yeah. And I ask him, oh, how long have you been here? It's like, forever. It's like, well, you can't have been here forever because you literally just got here. It's like, I can't even conceive of, well, when it comes to like things like God, when they say he's timeless and spaceless and immaterial, I just can't even get my head around what that would even, look like. It wouldn't look like would even be a phrase we could use.
I was watching somebody's video. I thought it was really funny when they were saying when William Lane Craig says that God is timeless, spaceless, limitless, beginningless. He's describing nothing. That's exactly what nothing is. You know what? I thought that was hilarious. It's like, yeah, you're right. That's not describing anything at all. That's the exact definition of what nothing is. But you're right. Eternity seems to me to be like hitting the pause button. It's like you can't have one event following another, so you can't hold a conversation. You can't do anything because there's no time. It's timeless. So it's like hitting a pause button. It's just nothing. Yeah, it's dumb.
Yeah,
it is. And the other thing, I guess, going back to what we were saying a long time ago is, and it's something I'm probably going to hang out with actual theists because I don't want to put words in their mouths, but when you were talking about the child who was like traumatized when they said, God's watching, the question I often have is, do theists actually believe in God? And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. I mean, if you believe that someone who's going to punish you forever after you die, do you think they would ever, for example, I would read the Bible, first of all. I would probably try and read it in the original languages. I would try and learn as much as I can about it and never do anything wrong ever, because I genuinely believe that I was being watched 24/7 by someone who, if I
Well-
actually, believed as strongly as people claim to, I would be a very different person. And I
Well,
don't
no,
think, I don't see that in other people.
No, what they do is they will tell you, some that I've encountered that will say that. And I'm talking about the ones who have been a little bit more thoughtful about it, rather than just, spouting the party line without having thought about it. They'll tell you that no, it's not that God punishes you. You're punishing yourself. It's the fact that God is a holy God, and if you don't come to Him in the way that has been prescribed, now that's interesting in and of itself, but then you can't be near Him. It's that being separated from God that causes the punishment. He's not doing anything. It's just you being separated from Him, to which I've always thought, well, He's not here now, and I'm separated from Him, and if this is as bad as it gets, this ain't bad at all.
Yeah,
But,
bring it on.
Yeah, bring it on.
It's a
But
Catholic,
one
isn't
of
it,
the
that's
ways-
separation?
That's one of the ways I think that they'll get around that God is He's omnibenevolent, but He still tortures people. No, He's not active in your punishment. You're doing that to yourself, you're punching yourself kind of thing. And then as far as studying the Bible, and originals and all that kind of stuff, quite a few will just simply, they will agree with you, but they will also say that God has given them a calling to do X, right? And that others have been called to do things like interpret the Bible or translate the Bible, like the NIV people or the King James people, and so that Bible is good enough for them. If kind of like if the King James version was good enough for Jesus, it's good enough for them. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
But that's usually the responses that I get.
It's interesting that you said it that way. I think it's a modern twist on a slightly older teaching, the way God punishes you, right? And so when I was going to church, especially the more fundamentalist churches early on, it was that God was punishing you. God's doing it.
Yeah.
And He was doing it because He can't tolerate wickedness or evil. Being a perfect holy being, He has to eventually eradicate all wickedness and evil. Everything that's not perfect. Which, is a strange way to say it in itself, because, I don't know, wouldn't He ultimately destroy everything that's not Him? And so maybe that's why they've changed it. But that's really kind of what I was taught growing up.
This idea that God eradicates, wickedness and evil and whatnot. And I was listening to this Christian guy on the radio the other day, and he was talking about, if God is with us, who can be against us? And the answer is, well, of course, Satan. But Satan can only be against us if we abandon God and that kind of thing. And he's saying someday we will see Satan as he really is, this tiny little twerp, and he's just this little bully, and he's really small when we're in our spiritual bodies, and we'll be able to have 5 minutes with him and beat him up, and so forth and so on, the way this guy was talking about it, right? And I thought, if that's true, first of all, why does God continue to let this little twerp do things that He doesn't want him to do, right? And I know what the answers are. Well, it's in fullness of time and whatnot. But it actually kind of paired up with something I had thought of earlier, and that was, God is all-powerful, and He can do anything and everything and whatnot, but apparently there's one thing He cannot do, and that is make you believe in Him. And I've always thought it's so amazing that we have a power over God that we can actually stop Him from doing something. Because He will, it is His will that none shall perish. That is what the Bible says. It is His will that we all come to Him. And yet we don't. By our own actions and our own decisions, we can't. Some of us won't. That means I have a power greater than God does. My will to be away from Him is apparently stronger than His will to have me with Him. That's fascinating to me.
Very interesting.
It is an interesting argument.
Although they'll just say, well, no, it's not that your will is greater than His. He just allows you to have that, right? But my response was, it's His will that we all come to Him, not His will that those who want to will come to Him. What? Right?
Right.
His will is that. I mean, it's literally, I can't remember which scripture it is, but His will is that none shall perish. well, then none will, right?
It also says His will will be done, and
That's right.
various
On earth as
forms.
it is in heaven. Right. His will be done. But apparently not. Not if I don't want it to be. To me, that's just amazing. And I know I'm not the first person to
guys,
think.
I got a roofer just showed up at my house, so I'm going to have to get out of here. But it's
Good
been a
luck.
great conversation listening so far. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. Take care.
We're having you guys.
Whoa, what was that? The devil what?
Oh, it's Velociraptor. So if
Oh,
the devil
yeah.
punches bad people, then isn't he good? I probably wasn't actually joking that we probably will be about 10th of the way through, and then, but no, it's nice to get a different perspective, because I am aware that when I sort of host these hangouts, and most of my subscribers agree a lot of what I say, you know, when it comes to, you know, atheism and, you know, especially religious upbringing. So I quite like other people, you know, other, you know, either Christians or general theists or people disagreeing with me. And like you say, Brett, you know, if we have got something wrong, I'm all ears. So
Christians about how they've got the Bible wrong. And it always tickles me because, you know, put them in a room together and, you know, it's a bloodbath.
well, yeah, the quote is, well, the quote I've adopted is, if you put 3 Christians in a room together, they won't even agree that 3 Christians in a room.
Exactly.
And they've all got the same. Sorry, Brett.
No, I was just going to add. Go ahead.
I was going to say, they've all got the same source material. It's not as if one had got, like, the Bible 2.0, where God goes, okay, sorry about the first one, it was a bit vague, here's what
Unless you get a Mormon in the room, and then that might change it a little bit.
I think we need to get a Mormon in here, and a Scientologist. That's what we need now.
but yeah, I mean, when he started quoting, you know, well, it says in here that, you know, this on this verse, this verse. I got to be honest, and it probably sounds funny coming from the Bible skeptic, but my eyes glaze over. Because it's like, okay, now you're just talking doctrine. I couldn't give 2 flying figs about doctrine. I don't care. I don't care what you guys argue about, how many angels fit on the head of a pin. It's irrelevant to me. I don't care. You know, you're talking about what God wants and what God does, and God does this, but you haven't given me any evidence God exists at all, so it's irrelevant. My point was just to simply say, isn't this rather odd, given this one viewpoint that God wills things and nothing he wills cannot be done, that we can will ourselves away from it? And he's, oh, no, you've got to read it this way. You know what I mean? And that makes me chuckle.
Yeah, I also think it's strange that, you know, for example, he can't lie, because I don't understand that, because, you know, especially when they define omnipotence in certain ways, because, you know, they say God can't do the logically inconsistent and that which isn't consistent with his nature, which describes me pretty perfectly as well, in that I can't do anything I can't do and I can do everything I can do. But, you know, when it says, you know, the Bible says he can't lie, that's probably something that a liar would say, you know. I don't think that's you know...
Not only that, but I can. Woo! There's another power you can chalk up to me.
I can do more things than God.
You know, right, there's an extra thing that I can do. You know, Superman can't do. Yeah, but I can. You know, Superman can't breathe. You know, can't hold his breath underwater. Guess what? I can. You know, it's things like that make, you know, he can't lie. Well, okay. Well, first of all, let's define that a little bit and find out what parts of the Bible that have been, you know, discovered to not be true, and ask you, did God say that? Or did he inspire that?
I also don't understand, you know, parables and lying, because they didn't actually happen. The whole point of a parable is a thing that didn't happen. So isn't saying something that didn't happen a lot? I mean, obviously that's if you think Jesus. The other thing I don't understand is the Trinity. I literally have no idea how that works. That we should be more like Jesus, but less like God. I don't know.
That is a favorite. Yeah, I
remember. Sorry, Brett.
No. I was just going to say, I remember you know, I get occasionally comments on my What the Bible Got Wrong, a Flat Earth series, and inevitably some Christian will say, it never says in the Bible that the Earth is flat. And I said, I acknowledge that the word flat isn't in there. It's describing the Earth as flat. But by the same token, it never says there's a Trinity either. And yet you say that's exactly what's being described, right?
Exactly.
So, you know, when it works in their favor, they'll use it. When it doesn't, it becomes a problem. And I'm willing to accept both. That the Bible does talk about the Earth being flat, and it talks about 3 people being God. You know, okay, fine, it's stupid. Both of them are dumb.
Yeah, I think the other thing is, the ongoing joke I have with myself more than anyone else is the Hezekiah 3:16 joke, and I always make it because I can't remember who it was, but this one of these street apologists said, "Oh, is the book of Hezekiah in the Old Testament or the New Testament?" And they say Old or New, and it's in neither because it's not a book of the Bible. It's whatever it is, and Hezekiah 3:16 is what. I often say at the end of, if I'm conversing with a particularly persistent theist, and I just say, "Oh, just read Hezekiah 3:16," and that explains everything. And it's just like this internet meme where it's like this website where it goes, it's where it talks about the Trinity, it talks about what else does it talk about? 666 being the number of the devil, talks about all these things. And obviously Hezekiah 3:16 doesn't exist, and it's all these things in the Bible, well, things that aren't in the Bible that people think are in the Bible. So like the number of the devil, it being in Hezekiah 3:16. And that's the funny thing, that these things that like most of hell is actually from Dante's Inferno rather than actually in the Bible. But people have adopted this sort of ingratiated, I should probably say, this idea of hell that really isn't. Like the same thing with the devil. The devil's barely in the Bible, and yet this idea of him being. I mean, I was amazed when I actually read it that he's in. Well, there was a wonderful documentary by is it Andy Hamilton? He's a British. It might be. I can't remember what nationality, but he's a British comedian. When he did a series about like a comedy series about something about being the devil. I can't remember exactly what it was. But then he did a documentary of about the devil in the Bible, and they did a parallel of, if it was a James Bond film, the amount of time the devil's in the Bible is this sentence: "Greetings, Mr. Bond." That's all he's in it in like comparative terms, which is nothing. That's all he can say. I'll try and find the link to the documentary because it's fascinating. It talks about Lilith in the Garden of Eden and things like that, of how they've adopted the devil into the Garden of Eden, but you're reading into something a lot more than it actually is there. But
well, I just had a comment. I saw a comment on that same the Flat Earth series that I did, where somebody tried to argue that if the Earth was flat, how could God hold the whole world in His hands? And I was like, what? This guy was confusing the kids' song, with something out of the Bible. There's nothing in the Bible that says He holds the whole world in His hand. That's a song.
Yeah, the whole wide world. I was going to say, that sounded familiar, but I was like, where do I know that from? It's like, oh, my childhood, I remember.
Yes, yep.
But that's the thing, because I think that's the problem, that when you don't actually read the Bible, it just becomes this sort of adoption of, well, this is vaguely religious sounding, so it must be in, the Bible.
God helps those who help themselves.
Exactly.
That's not in the Bible.
Yes.
But it sounds like it should be, but it's not.
And that's the thing that I think. This is, I guess, miles off. No, I suppose it's related to the topic. If you gave a child, for example, I think Nick mentioned at the start, fairy tales, and then gave them the Bible, do you think they'd actually be able to tell the difference if they were completely neutral, a secular?
No. I can tell you right now, no, because my children, I gave them my old. Whoops, hold on. Whoops. Oh, I think I accidentally hung up on them.
If that was God.
Yeah, really. Anyway, I gave them my old children's Bible, which has all the pictures in it and stuff like that, And my son thinks it's great, but it sits there on the floor, along with his Pokemon comics and others. He likes looking at the pictures, and some of the stories are kind of fun to read. But yeah, it's just a comic book. It's
when I was growing up, the story I loved most was David and Goliath, partly because it shared my name. I was like, oh my god, I defeated a giant. But it was a children's Bible, and I just adored the stories because I just thought they were great. It was like superheroes and these amazing things that happen. And I mean, granted, I didn't really Noah's Ark, when they told it to me, they sort of neglected to mention the fact. It's like, I think, is it Atheism is Unstoppable? It's one of those channels that has that weird woman as a bear costume who's going through all these stories. Neglects the whole genocide thing, but just goes through, oh, Noah and his family were saved. It's like, oh, that's great, isn't it?
Yeah, the story almost makes you think that Noah and his family were the only ones that were alive. They don't show you the people knocking at the door and scraping their fingernails on, getting splinters while they try to crawl in while the water chokes them to death. That's just not there.
And that's the thing that it also doesn't mention. I didn't realize until I read it, the bit just after that where he gets drunk in a tent. That's my favorite bit of the story. He was the most righteous guy on earth, and that's what he does. What can you say?
Because it was wine, and wine's okay.
Yeah, wine's okay. Yeah. How funny.
And what would you do if you'd been cooped up 40 days and 40 nights and then some while you waited for the water to go down with a bunch of animals? You'd be.
It's how you celebrate. What can I do? Tell you what, these clothes, they're dragging me down.
Oh man.
But I think it's in the same way, I guess touching upon the theme of this again, which I keep forgetting there's a theme.
Yeah.
And I like this sort of fluid conversation, but the whole, like the paper I cited, it's when they say, well, the thing is, the other thing I'd love to explore is the Spider-Man fallacy, or what I've referred to as the Spider-Man fallacy of, Spider-Man's set in New York, therefore it's likely it happened, and it's like, because if you add elements of truth to something, it's like a lie. The best lies are ones that touch upon truth. For example,
right.
if I told you, if I wanted to lie to you convincingly, I would lie about something that I know a little bit about, and that I know isn't true, but I know things that are true about it. And I think that's the thing with, the best literature is based around nuggets of truth. I was
taught that in my creative writing class when I was in college, that you need to write from where you know. There was one of my teachers said that, and then I had another one that said you can have one big lie, writing fiction. You can have one big lie. Everything else has to follow logically from that lie, which is that at the time was I was really into reading Stephen King books. And I realized that's what he did. He would have the one big lie. There's a pet cemetery in which you bury an animal and it'll come back to life. Now, everything else that follows from that in that story has to assume that that lie is true, and everybody else has to react to it in the way that people would react to that. And that's what makes for the good reading. That's what makes a good story. And I think that's exactly what you're hitting on, as far as all good lies have elements of truth. Actually, good lies have one good lie, and the rest of it is the truth.
I think that's the thing, and I think that's why Christianity is so strange, because it doesn't really have that much truth to it. I think, particularly the New Testament, it starts off badly with Jesus' birth. It's like it starts woefully when when you actually when people try and defend. I don't know how they defend it, actually. I've never actually heard someone try and defend the two chronologies.
They'll just say that it's two viewpoints, that they just harmonize them. But when you realize the way that they were written in order, where you've got Mark and there's no birth narrative, and then you've got Matthew and Luke with different sorts of birth narrative. Well, let me go back even further, where you've got Paul with Jesus being God's son at an adoption at the crucifixion. Then he gets pushed back further in Mark's to the baptism. That's when the dove comes down and says, on this day, you are my son. So now the adoption happens at the baptism in Mark. And then in Luke and Matthew, you have differing birth narratives, but it's at birth, and those came later. And then the latest gospel of all, you get John. Well, no, he's the Logos. He's been around since the beginning. I mean, Jesus goes from being God's son at his crucifixion, shortly after, with 20-something years after his crucifixion with Paul's letters, until you get to John 100 years later, and now Jesus has been pre-existent. He's God.
Yeah, John.
You can just watch the evolution. They completely deny it, but you can sit there and look at it. You're like, if you were just looking at this reasonably, you just can't help but see it.
And that's it. They must see it, though. I know
what you're saying, but
put your fundamentalist cap on. The thing is, I can't do that. I was never a fundamentalist, so I'm trying my hardest. But can you go back to that persona of?
No, because I never saw it that way. It was never pointed out to me until I had already lost all of that. That had never, it was as I was studying it that I came to see those things. They were trees, and in the forest that didn't exist. I just didn't know that they were there.
I guess, touching on what we were saying before about sort of narratives, the nativity is another one that people have sort of amalgamated into this nativity story, when actually they're fundamentally different. The nativity stories of, we have this idea of, Mary and Joseph, they go to a stable, Jesus is born, there's angels, brilliant. Yep. What they forget is the whole, the wise men following the star. Yep. They have that, but then they forget the genocide of, the infanticide, I should say, of King Herod. They forget the reason why they go to the place, and we sort of amalgamate the story, but...
Well, even you kind of messed up when you said the three wise men. It doesn't number them.
I realized that, yeah.
Yeah, there's no number. The reason they think there's three is because there were three gifts. And so they think each guy brought one gift, so there must have been only 3. But it doesn't. It just says the wise men. There could have been 50 of them for all we know. You know, there's that. What is it? There's that Monty Python sketch where, you know, Michelangelo, you know, paints the Last Supper, and he's got all these people in there. They're like, well, what's this guy doing? Well, if there was this guy, wasn't that guy there? And why couldn't there be this guy? If that, it's hilarious. But
Exactly, yeah.
it's that same idea. But that's exactly what you're talking about. People have heard the stories for so long that they you know, and preachers certainly don't try to correct this. They harmonize them so that, you know, Luke does not. I think it's Luke. I can't remember now which one, because I don't remember. But you know, one of them has the family on the donkey going down to Bethlehem from Nazareth, while the other one has the family already in Bethlehem. That's their hometown. It's not Nazareth. Nazareth comes later. It's after they come back from Egypt. That's Matthew. Come back from Egypt to avoid, which is really weird. I think it's Herod Antipas, or his son, you know, is now in charge of that region, so they have to go up to Nazareth in the Galilee. But the Nazareth of Galilee was being managed by another of Herod's sons. So what did you gain by going up there? Oh, well, I know why, because this is all made up.
And that's the thing. I think that's the problem, that as soon, I mean, it is like a house of cards, and I think it starts off with Genesis. I think you have to be at least willing to accept Genesis. And I think people who say it's allegorical are just...
Oh, man.
Are they actually serious when they're saying it's allegorical? Because if you get rid of that, you get rid of Jesus. Let's call a spade a spade.
I've thought the same thing. If there's no fall, then there's no redemption. So if that's just an allegory and it's not true, well, but the fact of the matter is there are Christians who do say that even the death of Jesus and that resurrection and stuff, that's allegorical. That while it did happen, in other words, you know, Jesus did die and all that kind of stuff, but that resurrection did not happen. The physical resurrection didn't occur. That is allegorical for something that we will all do if we learn to follow the pattern, the teachings of Christ. We will all die and resurrect in that same way. And I almost think that in some sense, even Paul had that idea, maybe, but that may be the more liberal Christian in me coming out. That was one of the phases or stages I went through in my, you know, deconversion.
Because you know, when you read Paul's writings, he knows almost nothing about Jesus. He knows nothing about his birth.
Not about the historical Jesus. No, he knows nothing.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the only thing he knows is that he died and resurrected. Pretty much. He doesn't know anything about his teachings. He contradicts a lot of his teachings. You know, which is why I always find it strange that, you know, people like Matthew 4:19 who are always going about the you know, Paul's letters. It's like you do realize you're following Christianity. You know, that Jesus bloke rather than that Paul bloke. Well, it strikes me as strange, but...
Well, the other thing is that there was something I thought was interesting, and that was in Paul, and this is something that like Matthew would be able to, because I'm not as big into the New Testament, because as far as I'm concerned, once you realize, because if you look at my channel, you see I spent a lot of time with the Old Testament. If there are flaws in the Old Testament, what's the point of going towards the end of the story if the beginning of the mystery is destroyed by all these inconsistencies? I don't care who done it. Because it's going to be built on a false foundation anyway, is how I look at it. So I attack the foundation. I don't care about your later theology and Jesus, and I don't care about that, right? I like to get to the foundation first. But at any rate, there is a passage that Paul says, because he's trying very desperately to be counted among the apostles and taken seriously as a Christian, right? And he's at odds with the Jerusalem church. He's you know, he won't call Peter Peter. He calls him Cephas. He just has issues with the Jerusalem church. Okay, but one of the things that he says is that Jesus first appeared to the 12 and then the 500 or whatever, and then he said, and then in the same way that he appeared to me as one untimely born or something like that. But the point is Paul is saying that the appearances of Jesus to these other people, to the apostles, right, occurred in the same way that it happened to him. And he explicitly tells you how it happens to him. It happens in a vision, and that he's knocked down. The other people around him don't hear anything. He's the one having this experience, right? But if what he and in speaking to the people in Jerusalem, if they're saying, yeah, I had a similar thing, then this whole business of he was walking with them, talking to them, eating with them, walking through walls, is nonsense, because Paul doesn't say that's the way it happened. Paul, who's our earliest witness to the whole thing, is saying, no, they had visions like I did. So I'm just the same. I'm just as good as them.
And that's the thing, because he never mentions, for example, an empty tomb, which is, William Lane Craig always likes to lord over the fact there was an empty tomb. It's a historical fact there was an empty tomb. It's like, Paul, the one who was what? Probably less than 2 decades after, is it? 50 odd, I would guess?
Yep.
No mention.
Nope.
And that's shocking for me, and something I would never thought.
Absolutely gigantic. But an apologist will tell you the reason why Paul doesn't mention it is because it was already accepted by everybody. Why would he talk about something that they already knew about? And I thought, well, he's teaching them about Jesus. Didn't they already know about that? And the crucifixion. He's talking about that. Well, didn't they know about that? So no, that's a crappy argument that, well, they would have known about it, so he wouldn't have mentioned it. Well, bullshit. He talks about stuff that he'd already mentioned, that they already knew.
The worst excuse I've ever heard, and probably it takes a lot to top, is there being inconsistencies demonstrates that it's reliable.
I love that one. Yeah.
Me, because it doesn't. It really doesn't. Now, as I've said in the past, I spent the last 3 years as a false memory researcher. You don't need to tell me that inconsistencies are part of memory. I'm happy with that.
Yep.
I'm less happy when people say it's the inerrant word of God, but we'll gloss over that fact. But when I don't know how you argue with someone who thinks that these inconsistencies in which one that says he wasn't even resurrected. There was a bloke sat by the tomb saying, oh yeah, the guy was in here, yeah, he's been resurrected, and then the gospel ends. That's not a resurrection in my eyes. That's a guy saying, oh yeah, he's been resurrected, and then the women fleeing scared. That's the end of as we all know, the original end of the gospel of Mark, the oldest one, and it's like that. And then you can see the evolution from Matthew to Luke to John. Well, John, he's all singing, all dancing. He's playing the banjo. He's hang gliding everywhere and whatever. He's just doing everything on steroids, basically.
That's right.
You see this evolution, but they're not inconsistency. I don't want to say contradictions because in the same way, the Judas thing, is it a contradiction? It's like neither of them say he actually died. They just say he was hanged, and then the other one is the bowing axe.
Right.
Yeah. So the way they try and reconcile it, and then people go along with it, and that really. I don't know how to reason with someone who's so happy to accept it. And again, I'm trying my hardest to understand this, because I do. The reason why I do these conversations is because I want to throw out these ideas out and see what sticks, but I can't. There's some things my brain doesn't understand.
You're beginning. You can kind of understand then the reason why there are certain topics that I will not discuss, and it's for that very reason. It's because if you do certain sort of harmonizations, you can kind of get rid of them. If like the Judas thing, although that's one that I just wouldn't take on for the very reason that you just stated it. They can come up with some sort of an excuse, and it's not that that they've solved it. That's not the point. It doesn't. The point is that no. See, that leaves them with something. When I do my things, I want to leave them with nothing. I want you to come away and go, I can't argue against that. I cannot come up with a reason why what I'm saying is right and what you're saying is wrong. So my whole thing with like the again, I'll just go back to the flat Earth since it's been something I've been talking about recently. Some comments on my page. Their really only argument is it doesn't say that it's flat, and I immediately agree with them. Yep, you're absolutely right. It doesn't say it, but it describes it. Now you try to tell me how that's not describing it, and to a person, they can't. They just get frustrated and they leave, and that is fine with me. If anybody could ever argue me out of a position, a skeptical position, I will be argued out of it. I don't mind. I'm not here to argue that. What I'm here to do is to point out the things that finally convinced me there's no way. There is no way that this thing was inspired by an omniscient being. It can't be. Not with these kind of problems. Not if he knew when me and you and everybody else were going to, other people were going to be reading this, we'd catch them, and that would be our undoing. I just can't believe that.
And that's the thing. I can't. Like people say. I think it was Messianic Manic's last video, or one of his last videos, about William Lane Craig and his argument from freedom, that I'm free to reject naturalism, and if I don't have free will, that one, I'm sure everyone's seen it. But it's like, I can't will myself to believe something that I can't, if I've got a pen in my hand, I can't say I believe this so much that it's going to float. I just can't. And the same way, I can't believe in something, the same way I'm an atheist. Is that pronounced? Someone who can't even conceive of God. So, I guess one step beyond atheist of, I can't even get a coherent idea of what God is, let alone, understand.
That's great. Yeah. What was the word you used?
Is it igtheist?
Oh, I have heard that.
I think so. It's spelt like that. I don't know if it's pronounced like that, but I'm going to go with it. So,
well, you know what? Maybe that's going to be a new label for me then, because I'm at that too. It's not that I've rejected these; I can't even get around it anymore.
And that's the thing. In the same way that I was talking to Veckel a few weeks ago, or probably months ago now. I identify as a strong atheist because I think weak atheists are. I think the name is quite right because it's weak in saying, "Oh, I don't believe in God." Whereas for me, I'm saying, okay, what would the universe look like if there is a God that, for example, answers prayers or performs miracles? And it's simply not this universe. It might be another universe, but it's not this one. And the reason why I sort of identify as a strong atheist, or become to adopt the strong atheist, is because I'm not waiting for more evidence to see if there's a God. I'm not sat on the fence going, in the same way, I'm not on the fence of, oh, maybe Loch Ness Monster exists, maybe it doesn't. Yeah. I'm going to say no. In the same way when one of my favorite videos I did was about Loch Ness. It was the video was called, it was something like, this guy has a point, listen to him, atheist, something like that. I'll try and find the video because it's hilarious. And he was like, in the 1% or in the 99% of the knowledge that we don't have in the universe, is it possible for God to exist? Yeah. And the analogy I gave was, in the 99% of the Loch Ness that we haven't explored, is it possible that Loch Ness lives in there? And it's like, it's possible, but you're saying in the 1% that we do know that he isn't there, isn't that defeating of the entire concept of God? That if he's, if he is everywhere, then he should be everywhere, not in 99% of everywhere.
And that whole thing with the Loch Ness, and this is what I would point out if somebody was trying to make that comparison, like the Loch Ness and God, right? And I feel equally non-believing in both, but I actually have more of a reason. If you were to tell me, put a gun to my head, okay, you got to choose one of those to have a little bit more faith in, right? I would say, well, I'm going to pick Loch Ness because I happen to know there were such thing as plesiosaurs. I happen to know they lived in the water. Now, given the fact that things we know about geology and the history, that the chances of something like that living in the loch are non-existent, but there's some weird things about the universe, and since these things did exist, water, pools of water, large enough pools of water in which these creatures lived, those creatures did live, I'm going to go with Loch Ness. But God, you can't even show me something that even approaches that I can say, yeah, that I understand that, so maybe God could come from that. There's nothing.
It's like when they talk about, when it was Ben Stein talking about, Richard Dawkins and panspermia, saying, oh, so he's saying it's possible aliens did it, but God didn't. It's like, we have evidence that life exists in the universe that can make, we can make a close approximation of, we maybe can't make life per se, but I think aliens making life is infinitely more plausible than a guy speaking to dust and making it out of a rib. That's the sort of level we're talking about. We have evidence of life, producing, like I say, we can produce like synthetic life, I guess. So yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. It's like when they say, oh well, they're saying, well, aliens is, aliens is infinitely more plausible than an omnipotent, omniscient, timeless, spaceless, immaterial, disembodied mind. And that's the thing that they sort of look down on, directed panspermia in particular. And then, they just say, oh, see these irrational atheists like saying, oh, they're saying aliens could have done it. It's like, I'm not saying I hold to this position. And this is where Richard Dawkins got caught out. That bit got quote mined out of it, and it was, it could have happened like this. So, and that's the thing, that are they so... And it's this concept. I mean, like I say, my masters will be on, why do people not accept evolution? It seems to be, minimal skepticism when it comes to things they believe, and maximally skepticism about things they don't believe. For example, they'll believe evolution when they see a cow give birth to a monkey or whatever the nonsense they say. But when it comes to a guy raising from the dead, oh, it says in a book. What more do you need than that? So it's hyper skepticism versus,
well, it's just that they've got, if I were to tell you that Batman stopped a bullet, right? you would have to come up with an explanation. Well, show me how Batman could stop a bullet. Well, show me how he developed the special kind of armor that could do that. You show me where this was, and okay, that's what's required, right? But for Superman to do, well, that's just Superman. Superman stops bullets. It's the same thing. It's well, you got to show me all this stuff. Well, no, I'm telling you. Look, here's the result. See the bullet? There's Batman. Okay, it fell out. Yeah, we know he stopped it. Oh, but you have to explain how it happened. Okay, well, let me show you how. Yeah, but were you there? Did you see the bullet go flying through? Did you? Okay, but how did you know your Superman did it? Well, because Superman does it.
And that's the thing. When you started saying that, I thought, did you mean Superman? And that's the thing. I fell for your thing of we expect certain things from certain people or certain concepts, and that sort of. They just hand wave it away, and that's the thing.
Because God does that. That's what God does. God speaks things into being. Well, how does He speak? I don't have to explain to you how He speaks. If God wanted to speak and it happened, it would happen. There's no reason for me to explain that to you. That's how He do it.
And that's the problem I have with any God did it explanation, is that I have no problem with people saying that the scientific, religious people, they say, okay, I believe that God, is involved some way, but I'm interested in how God does it. I just got to middle and say, how does the universe work, rather than how does God do something in the universe? But I have infinitely more respect for sort of people who say, I want to know how God did it, than just saying, well, God did it, that's all I need to know. Right. And that it's a conversation ender, as with most of the sort of theistic arguments that seem to be.
Yep. So. Guys, do you know?
Wait a second, Nick. Hold on, just a quick second. I just need to bow out. I'm sorry, but it's time for me to head out of here, guys.
Well, thanks for joining us.
Yep.
It's been a pleasure as always.
Always. Yeah, all right. Thanks. Hey, I'm sorry, Nick. I will. I'll try to listen at this point going forward, so I don't miss what you have to say. See you guys.
Yeah. Take care, Brett.
So what I wanted to say is, I don't know. Have you read? In one of the Richard Dawkins books, I think it's The Evolution, the Greatest Show on Earth, one of the latest ones. The story how a scientist was accompanied just by a random person in an airplane, and they had a conversation, and that person asked, what do you do? And he started describing his experiments, how they put fish in several different ponds. In one pond they have big stones, big pebbles as a background, and another pond little pebbles as a background. In one pond they put some fish that would eat this little fish. In another pond they put just this kind of prey fish without no predators. And they leave them for several years, and after several years, they can see that in those ponds where predators, the fish tends to become colorful and to become very unlike the background. That's because of sexual selection, and because females favor some males that they can see better. And where there were predators, it was a completely opposite direction. The prey fish became gray and with exactly the same colors as the background. Where there was mild predators, they put two different types of predators. One very strong and very proficient, and some mild predators. It was something in between with the mild predators. And the guy was very, very interested. He said, well, that sounds great. That was very, very interesting. What's that science that you're doing? What's that theory you're basing your research on? And the scientists responded, that's the theory, that's a confirmation of the theory of of evolution by natural selection by Charles Darwin. And the guy started to be crazy. He said, what? He immediately stopped the conversation, looked away, and became very, very hostile. So that's the power of scripture, and the power of the guys who who just refuse to believe evidence, and that's towards your what you mentioned before. So some things, when they are in the religious context, they are perceived completely different from if they are put out of religious context. As soon as you make it clear for a person that it's something that fights with your religion, then they start to be hostile.
And I think evolution is, rightly or wrongly, at the brunt of a lot of these issues because, well, I don't really know why. I think abiogenesis probably would be the thing they would, if they knew what the hell it was, they would probably attack that more. But I think that's the thing that it is fascinating. And like I say, I'm doing my master's in it in September, so I think it's fascinating why people don't accept evolution. But the question for me is, well, why not? Is it not understanding evolution? Is it not understanding how science works? Is it not understanding, or is it, is it particular beliefs that one already holds? Is it, is it? I was reading an interesting paper that I didn't get a chance to on my Hangout mention, was paranormal belief. That seems to be correlated with, rejection of evolution. So there's a number of. I don't think it's quite as simple to say religion per se. That people who are religious won't accept evolution, because in Europe 70% of Christians accept evolution in Europe, so whereas it's probably about half that in America, I think. So I think it's more the type of religious person that it is. So I think religion is a bit of a red herring, saying if it contradicts the Bible, because there's Fiona is an evolution. She's got a PhD in, is it molecular biology or something? Pretty smart. So and she's a Christian. In the same way, Francis Collins, head of the Human Genome Project, pretty much confirmed evolution, is an evangelical Christian. Kenneth Miller, who's a Catholic, I believe, I'm not 100% sure, but an advocate of evolution, and stood against intelligent design at the Dover trial. So I think it's more how people think than what people think. That's my sort of gut reaction. Well, not gut reaction, based on what I've read so far. But I don't think people have hit upon it yet. It's so inconsistent, the data. It's sometimes it's religion, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's gut instinct, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's understanding science, sometimes it's not. So I think there's an underlying level, and I'm trying to figure out what exactly people like Arcane Logos or Arcane Truth, whatever he's called, Pillbox, True Empiricism, and for me it seems to be more conspiracy thinking. That seems to be the driving factor. That's for me where I would, well, that's what I'm going to test, because it seems to be, it's less about, they may understand science, they may not. I think it's more a case of there's more to things than they seem, and it seems like Matthew 4:19 sort of hinted at that, of people who claim to be Christians aren't, because there's a deeper reality. There's the elect and there's the non-elect, or I don't know if there's a word for non-elect, but the equivalent of. And I think that's what it is. So for me, and like I say, that my research will be predominantly sort of derived from that of, it's not understanding science, it's not religious belief, it's not paranormal belief. It's more conspiracy thinking and being conspiracy motivated. That for me is, if I was in the stock market, I'd say put your stock in that, because I think it's less religion, it's more how some religious people think. And for me, that's where I'm going with my research. But I'm prepared to be wrong. I'm prepared to say maybe it's not. Maybe it is something that no one's thought of before. Like I say, there's any number of things why people don't accept anything. It might just be a simple not understanding it. But then, why do people accept quantum mechanics but not evolution? Because quantum mechanics is alien to most people. So it's. But I think it just gets a hard deal, because, like you say, it's an interesting topic until someone drops the E-bomb, and people say, "Oh, it can't be evolution. It's variation. It's changes in it's not evolution. It's variation, which is identical to evolution, but just calls it a different name. A rose by any other name smells as sweet." So.
Yeah, that's funny, actually. Yeah, it's like calling yourself an non-theist instead of atheist, which is basically the same thing for me.
Exactly, yeah. So I think. Oh, sorry, I just read your comment. So, on which wonderful note, do you want to give a concluding remark about why you think religious upbringing fails?
Well, yeah. So as we discussed here, and we got a very good testimony from our guests later, we see that religious upbringing often gives children very tough times with distinguishing between what's real, what's not real, fear of darkness, fear of punishment, things like guilt, like feeling dirty, feeling inadequate, and fearing uh, death, fearing rejection by parents, a lot of stuff which can be easily thrown away if the child is brought up in a realistic and circular way. So I believe that even religious parents can add value to their children by giving them more uh, reasonable upbringing, by teaching them to think for themselves, to value critical thinking. That's pretty much my conclusion. That's probably it. We will be concluding our discussion.